Good morning, afternoon, evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm George Moss again here at allpointstv.com, and we're very glad to have you with us here on Monday. And we are coming to you on the day in which you're playing for the championship football game, and everybody is excited about who's going to win the championship between the two perennial players, between Clemson and Alabama. And there are some that are saying they're sick of this. These two teams playing every year. It seems like every year you have Clemson and Alabama, the Crimson Tide, playing in the championship game. But some of that, I think, is based upon this continuation of the bashing of the South in a way, because both these teams are in the southern part of the country, and I don't think if it were a rivalry anywhere else, where it would be who's tired of the rivalry between the Yankees and the Dodgers. I mean, those were two teams. The Brooklyn. Remember when you had the Brooklyn Dodgers and the New York Yankees, and they're playing in the World Series. Nobody got tired of that. But now we got a team from South Carolina, Clemson, and a team from Alabama. All of a sudden, they're tired of these two teams dominating everything. John, it's like the beating down in the South again. You know, and let me ask you something. Now that I'm on that point, and it won't be on the long, but now that I'm on that point, what happened to the blue-gray game, the North and the South? They got rid of that game, right? Because it's bringing up this fight between the North and the South. They had to bury that somewhere. And they couldn't let that out there in the football where you're reliving and rehashing the politics of the 19th century. So that's out of here, and now it's about all these other teams. But I don't see any difference in terms of why the outcry is going on about why are these two teams always out there at the end of the season playing. In the last, 5 years, it's been either Alabama. 4 of those years, Alabama's been the championship team, and then the other year it was Clemson. And who wants that to go on? We need to have some. Either team out of California, you know, out of these liberal states. And so I see a lot of the politics even in our athletics in this country. And I'm pulling. Of course, I'm from Alabama, so I'm kind of biased there. But you'd be surprised of the team that I'm picking. I'm going with the underdog, but I would be surprised if Alabama loses. Anyway, that's it. We are coming to you on the day of the championship game, and hope you will, your team will come out on top. Let me start with. I have a couple of things I want to cover today in our discussion, and it has to do with these people, these people that are allegedly running this country. I don't know if anybody's running the country. I mean, who's manning the store? Who is manning the store here? And who's on first? What's on second? And I don't know, which is really all the bases. I don't know used to be on third, and that Abbott and Costello in that comedy of Abbott and Costello, the comedy has moved out of the comedy routine of Abbott and Costello. It's been moved to Washington D.C., the nation's capital. We don't know. So who's on first? I don't know, and I don't think they know. What's on second? Who knows the answer to that question? And I don't know. It's supposed to be on third, but I don't know is in Congress. And we have some real. I don't know if you notice this or not. We have some real buffoons. These are some really ignorant people that's in control of this country. I mean, you listen to these people. Maxine Waters. What about this woman from the 13th district in Michigan, Rashida Tlaib, who just got elected and is serving her first term? She wasn't even installed in office on the 3rd of January before she made this comment about she's talking to her son and telling her son, bullets don't win. I guess she's trying to make sure her children will not be bullies. And then she went to the commander-in-chief. He's a bully because they don't agree with what he's saying. And then she says that she's talking to her sons now through the microphone, and they're supposed to be understanding that she is not tolerant of any bullies. So Donald Trump's a bully, and we are going to impeach that. And then she used that word that was beneath the level of the well, I don't know if anything is beneath the level of the Congress today, but you would think that the language would have been remiss based upon the standing of these representatives who are being elected to represent the American people. And we certainly don't want our representatives cursing in public and using that kind of foul language. But she's going to impeach Donald Trump. And then you had Maxine Waters, who before the midterm election was saying, they tell her, Maxine, don't say the word impeachment, to which she then responds, impeach, impeach, impeach. So I thought what we'd do today, to start out at least this program today, we would start out to talk about what that means. Because I don't think that Rashida Tlaib or Maxine Waters, I don't even think they understand the impeachment process. So I thought what we would do today, as a beginning point, we just simply come in and talk about what you mean by that. I mean, what is impeachment? And what does that process entail? So let me just kind of go and ferret out what that means and what the Constitution, what the standard in the Constitution is for bringing that about. So let's start out with, let's first of all define what you mean by impeachment. Can we do that first of all? This is for you, Maxine Waters, because I don't think you guys got a clue about what you're doing up there in Washington. And to the detriment of the American people, we're being disserved by our government, which is not really our government. It's the government of the politicians and the government of the political leaders in this country. There's no government speaking in our name. Well, there's no government. Well, that's not even true either. There is a government speaking in our name, but it does not represent the voice in which it proclaims to speak. It does not represent the American people. And I don't care whether you're talking about Democrats or Republicans. Neither one of these parties represent the American people. But let's go back and describe what you mean by impeach. So Maxine, when you say impeach, 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 all you're saying is that you want to bring about an accusation against the President of the United States in this case. And of course, the Congress can impeach any federal office holder. State office holders, that does not apply. That's up to the state legislature to bring that about. There's a line of demarcation between the federal office holders and the state office holders. So when you're talking about impeachment in the Congress, and she is in the House of the Congress, the two branches of the Congress, she's in the House, and she's saying impeach, impeach, impeach. So in the Constitution, in Article 1, Section 2, Clause 5, here's what it says. The House of Representatives shall choose their Speaker and other officers and shall have the sole power of impeachment. Sole, S-O-L-E, the sole power of impeachment, which means that no other body, no other figures can impeach a federal office holder. They must be impeached in the House of Representatives. In order to bring that about, you have to have a majority vote. So therefore, you need more than Maxine Waters to bring it about. So when she says impeach, 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 it does not mean because she's a member of the House that she can, on her own claim, bring about the impeachment of any office holder in the federal government. It has to be by a majority vote, and if all of them are meeting, since there are 435 members of the House, it will require 218 votes to impeach a president, a vice president, or all civil officers of the United States. Civil officers of the United States, not civil officers of the state office holders. That doesn't apply to them. So the federal government cannot institute impeachment against office holders that are inside the states. They cannot impeach, for example, a governor, or they cannot impeach a member of the state legislatures. It is the impeachment is invoked by Article 2, Section 4. So let me go and read that in Article 2, Section 4 and see what it says there. Well, I can quote it, but let me just read it so you won't think I'm making it up. The president, vice president, and all civil officers of the United States shall be removed from office upon impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, and other high crimes and misdemeanors. Okay, now that I found it, I read it again. I'll read it this time. The president, vice president, and all civil officers of the United States, not of the 50 states, but of the United States as a federal branch, the federal branch of government. The president, vice president, and all civil officers of the United States shall be removed from office on impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. So to those that's calling for impeachment, you got to then have a basis for bringing that charge before the members of the House be voted upon, and the charge has to be based upon these circumstances that's defined in Article 2, Section 4, and it says for treason. That's what Mueller's trying to investigate. We found no. And even if there was collusion, it's not treason, because treason is not an illegal act. But look, it has to be treason, bribery, and I don't know what bribes have been alleged to be paid. And it says, and other high crimes. So treason is a high crime, and bribery is a high crime. And then it says, and other high crimes, as those two are, and misdemeanors. And I don't think the president and other civil office holders, based upon their standing as federal office holders, entrusted with the collective trust of the entire nation, more serious than in the state level because it just resides in that state. But a federal office holder, the mistakes made on that level and any impropriety on that level affects the entire country. So I don't think you can have a low crime that is committed on the federal level. So it says that treason is a high crime and bribery is a high crime, and then it says in other high crimes and misdemeanors, but all crimes committed on the federal level are high crimes because of the level in which the crimes are committed against the entire nation as a collective. Okay, so let's say we have a majority vote against the president in the House of Representatives, and we've done that on two occasions. Andrew Johnson, the 17th president of the United States, who had a charge leveled against him by the House in 1868. The ridiculous claim was, in that case, was that the president, Andrew Johnson, did not have the authority to remove a member of his own cabinet, Edwin Stanton, who was the Secretary of War, since changed the Secretary of Defense, but really was Secretary of War at that time. And Johnson wanted to remove Stanton, and the claim was made by the Senate and also by the House that if you have a person that's a cabinet member that's approved to be a member of the cabinet by the Senate based upon the Article 2, the confirmation of the nominee is confirmed by the Senate, then the Senate must then be involved in the removal of the person. Since it's confirmed by the Senate, therefore the Senate has removed the person. So Johnson tried to remove Stanton, and the Senate then objected to it, and the House voted articles of impeachment, saying that was a high crime, and brought charges against Andrew Johnson. That does not mean that Johnson was removed from office because they impeached him, just like it did not mean that Clinton, the second president, the second and only president that was impeached, that means removed from office. Because then, after the impeachment has occurred, and under the Article 1, Section 2, Clause 5, then in Article 1, Section 3, Clause 6, let me read that to you. Article 1, Section 3, Clause 6. And I will find that because I don't want you to think I'm making this up. After you impeach, the matter is referred to the Senate for trial. And here's what it says in Article 1, Section 3, Clause 6. The Senate shall have the sole power, S-O-L-E, the sole power. They're the only ones that can try the federal office holder. The Senate should have the sole power to try all federal level impeachments. But let me read what it says here so you get the language straight. The Senate shall have the sole power to try all impeachments. And that references back to Article 1, Section 2, Clause 5. They're talking about all impeachments on the federal level, not in the states, but in the federal government. When sitting for that purpose, the Senate is now sitting to try the federal office holder based upon the impeachment charge. And it can be the president, the vice president, and it says, and other civil officers, members of the Supreme Court, members of the president's cabinet. It can be any of the members of the appointed staff. They all are subject to impeachment. Once they level the charge in the House by a majority vote, then the matter is referred to the Senate for trial. But when you're trying the president in the Senate, the stakes are picked up a little bit above the pale in all the other federal cases of impeachment. In the case of the president, it says this in Article 1, Section 3, Clause 6. When sitting for that purpose in trying the president, they shall be on oath of affirmation, meaning that all the members of the Senate are sworn to abide by the constitutional mandates. When it is the president that's on trial in front of the Senate, the Chief Justice shall preside, unlike in any of the other cases. The presiding officer in the other cases would be the Vice President of the United States. But in the case of the president, the presiding officer is the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Now, why would that be the case? Because if you have the Vice President sitting as the chief office holder when the president's on trial, he gains from the removal of the president, has a vested interest in it, and cannot be, you would not expect him to be a non-interested presiding officer. So when the president is the person on trial, then the vice president, who's the president of the Senate, is moved out of the way, and they bring in the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, and the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court presides over the trial when the president's the one on trial. He does not, in fact, preside over it if the vice president is on trial. The presiding officer in that case is a president pro tem, which is usually the oldest member of the Senate, of the party that is, in fact, the party that is the majority party, called the president pro tem, the temporary president in the absence of the president. So it does not mean then, Maxine, and also to you down there in Michigan, in the 13th district, It does not mean that when the president is in fact impeached, the president removed from office. It means that you have a political charge made against the president. And now we have to ferret out the propriety of the charge and see if the charge has any validity. And if it does, confirmed by 2/3. Let's see here. And no person shall be convicted of the impeachment charge without the concurrence of 2/3 of the members present. So then it takes 6 or 7 votes if you are looking at how many are there. Let's say that all 100 members of the Senate are sitting. It takes 6 or 7 votes to remove a president, in this case here, Donald Trump, from the office. And that's a standard that was raised at a much higher level because the impeachment process is not a legal process, it's a political process. And the framers had enough prescient knowledge, there's a political process, to put a supermajority in place so it would not be easy to remove a president, because look how serious that is. The president is elected by 63 million people, and they have members of a political body, which is what the House is and also the Senate, to invoke the verdict of the American people. That's a very serious thing to do. So therefore, it's more than a majority vote to take the president out. It would take a 2/3 vote. So of the 100 members of the Senate that are sitting, it takes 6, 7 votes of those senators to remove the president from office, because that's a very serious thing to invoke the election, come behind and invoke it out of existence by putting in a vice president in the place of the elected office holder. That's a very serious thing to do. And for these persons calling for the invoking of the election of 2016 and saying impeach, 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 I can tell you right now, these people are fascists. No person that respects the Constitution of the United States and how we elect an office holder in this country would take this lightly, that we're going to impeach the president because we don't like his style.
Well, I saw a meme on Facebook. I don't know if it's accurate. You might, because you're more of a historian, but the Democrats have tried to impeach every Republican president since Eisenhower. This claims. Is that true?
That's true.
I mean, my God, I mean, just because, and basically, and the Democrats have gotten away way worse stuff, I think, than Republicans have. I mean, you and I disagree. I think Richard Nixon did order Watergate break-in.
Okay.
But the fact is that even in light of that stuff, it pales in comparison to what these current presidents and the Democrats and Republicans got away with since then.
That's right.
Way worse. I mean, he was not as dirty as. I mean, they kept on saying he was a crook. For what? For if you're spying on them, they do the same thing. I mean, it is crooked, but they're not anymore. Their kids a pot calling the kettle black on that.
Yeah, John. The only reason they would have that as a crime, a high crime, is because for the same reason they're trying to invoke this thing about collusion. It's the idea that they had. We were very naive back in that time period. We're not quite as naive now as we were back in 1972. We thought at that time that our politicians are pristine. I mean, they're like the Pope, the honorable representative. We used to call them honorable. By the way, we don't call them honorable anymore. I think we've gotten past that idea.
We had to, because every time we uttered it, we'd be snickering uncontrollably. So we couldn't start doing that in the media anymore. So they had to eliminate it.
Yeah. So we don't have that idea anymore, right? So we don't call them honorable anymore. But back in that time period, we thought of our politicians as really trying to be representative of the body politic. These people are trying to find out the best way to govern. They're not selfish. They're not trying to pursue power. And they want to do the most good for the most people. Well, did we get over that one?
How do you even get through that without breaking into laughter? I'm serious.
It was hard, John.
Because every time I want to try to make them sound noble, I choke because I know the opposite.
Yeah, well, I think we all have to come out of that state of. I think that's an osmotic state. We all have come through the state of osmosis where we've been, sleepwalking, because that's what we were taught in school. I know I was. I mean, I was stunned when the first president I listened to on TV was Eisenhower, and I was stunned when I heard him and he sounded like a human being. I thought they were gods, because in the classroom they were teaching it so that we thought they way up here. So when I heard him speak on TV, I thought, I sat there and I was riveted to the TV. But when he sounded just like a human being, I was very stunned. I thought these guys were like angels. Okay, we're taking a break at this point, but I hope you'll come back after the 4-minute pause from WFOV. And we're very glad to have you. I didn't mention you at the very beginning of the program, but we're very glad to have you with us. And we'll see you hopefully on the other side of the break. This impeachment process has to be understood. But we're not any longer as naive as we were in 1972, when they were making it seem like this is such a crime. The breaking in of the Watergate Hotel and this intrusion into trying to get some bad things on the opposition party, called today Opposition Research. That's what it was then. But the idea there was a break-in and they're trying to get a comeuppance on the other party, we thought that was terrible, because we did not understand our politicians at that time. But we're not as naive now. So they brought the issue of Watergate before the American public, and they kept it in front of the public for 2 years until it became impossible for anybody to stand behind Richard Nixon up to the standards required in the Constitution. Don't forget what I just read there a minute ago. 2/3 vote required in the Senate. That's a very high standard. And I want you to watch what they're doing right now. It took them 2 years to put pressure on Richard Nixon and also on his supporters in the Republican Party to not stand behind Nixon, because it's hard. You're not going to get 2/3 vote, because they'll vote on party lines. And that's why Johnson, back in 1868, was not removed from office. They fell by 1 vote. And that's why it was brought to a vote in the Senate. But how did they remove Nixon? They made it difficult for the Senate to come behind Richard Nixon and vote party line, because that would have outed them as being supportive of a criminal. But they had to criminalize him, first of all, in the media. And how they removed him was through the Washington Post and the New York Times. And by the way, you're seeing a repeat of that process right now, because it was said this past weekend that Mueller may take another 6 months before he makes his report known, public. What are they doing there? What do you think they're doing there? They have not broken the support for Donald Trump in the Senate, and they will be wasting their time to be bringing an impeachment against this president and don't have the votes in the Senate, and they don't have the votes in the Senate. And they won't have the votes in the Senate in 2020, because they're not going to have 6 or 7 Democrats in the Senate. Even because they gained seats this past time in the Senate. And so, the Republican Party did. And they're not going to have 6 or 7 Democrats in the Senate if they win another midterm election. Of course, it'll be the 4-year election next time in 2020, but I'm talking about the midterm and how it plays out in the Senate. They still won't have 6 or 7 votes. So what they have to do here is, and this is what they're trying to do, they're making it too hot for any senator to come behind Donald Trump and support his presidency, because they want this man ousted. If they cannot win the election to get him out, they want to remove him. Okay, you're back now from WFOV, and we're glad that you returned. But they know they cannot remove this president through the process here. There's a process to remove the president, but they cannot invoke this process and remove the president. And they know that. And that's why we're now seeing this delay in terms of Mueller. If Mueller does not issue his report for another 6 months, that means they recognize the climate is not yet there to create this climate through which it becomes inappropriate for anyone to stand behind the president. And the Republican Party is standing behind the president. The jeopardy is not yet what it needs to be to remove him, based upon the way in which it was handled in 1974 when they removed Richard Nixon August 9th, 1974. And they removed him through the pressure. When they were getting ready to bring about the articles of impeachment, they put it on TV first of all. And so that was a power center. They put it there in front of the American people. We were watching the impeachment process playing out on TV every day. Then the Washington Post and New York Times are ringing the president every day on the front pages of the newspaper. So the media is involved in it. The fourth estate. They kept on driving the point. This president is an outlaw. This president is a criminal. That this was an aberration of how politics operates in Washington. They are pristine, other than Richard Nixon. Look at how this man has been out here doing things that's unlike what goes on in Washington. Our politics is basically clean in this country. And so they had to dirty the process up and get him removed through the pressure. So after they were getting ready to impeach the president, who was never impeached, by the way, the House never voted articles of impeachment against Richard Nixon. Unlike in Johnson's case, there was never articles of impeachment voted by the House of Representatives against this president. This president, Nixon, the 37th president of the United States, to make sure I got that right, 37th president of the United States, Richard Nixon was never impeached. After the pressure got so bad, the members of the Senate that were members of the House, some of the more important leaders in the Senate, those that had clout in the Senate, went to Richard Nixon and said, Mr. President, this situation is very hot. And it is very difficult for us to come out in support of you because the way this is being described before the American people, it is too much pressure. And we have to, in 74, we have to go before the voters to win our seats. Don't forget this is August in which Nixon is resigning. The election is going to be in November. And they went to Nixon and told him that this was a very hot issue and that if it came before a vote, they would be exposed because they're vulnerable based upon their seeking re-election in that year. If it had been 73, it might have been something different. But they kept on prolonging the impeachment because we're not there yet with the votes in the Senate. So the pressure kept building. And who was the person bringing this pressure? Bob Woodward. Have you seen him lately? Have you seen him? You know that song? Dun, 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 dun. Have you seen him? Have you seen him? Well, it's like, have you seen Bob Woodward? Have you seen Carl Bernstein? Yeah, you've seen them. They're out there doing the same thing right now with Donald Trump. All of a sudden, they're back out there, aren't they? Carl Bernstein is out there on CNN. Bob Woodward put a book out claiming in his book fraud. It just so happens it comes out around this time. And so they're driving this narrative, but they're not there yet. They have the support for the president is still there in the Senate. So those of you that's waiting for Maxine Waters to prevail in the House, I can tell you right now, they're not bringing that charge yet. Because it will be for naught, because the Senate is not going to avow this president at this point. And you can't remove the president just because of impeachment. You have to convict the president. You can go and read Article 1, Section 2, Clause 5, and then go read Article 1, Section 3, Clause 6. The trial in the Senate. The president's support in the Senate is still standing strong. They don't have the 2/3 vote. So when I heard that Mueller was going to postpone his investigation, the closing of his investigation, that is going to take more time to do his report, all that's politics. Because they've not found anything in terms of collusion. Not that collusion is even a crime. In fact, this whole investigation is an investigation in search of a crime. That's how illegal this whole process is. These people are fascists. I'm telling you. These people that are trying to bring about this invoking of the election in 2016. They're trying to rescind the verdict of 63 million people. And to do that, you have to be a fascist. These people, Mueller, James Comey, this James Clapper, who's that other, Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, the communications they had going on behind closed doors in the intelligence network of this country. The deep state. The deep state meaning the deep state is all of the deep state is all of the ones in the federal government. Those that are masked and those that are behind the scenes. That's the deep state. And they were talking very openly about how they were going to try to stop this president. First of all, they didn't think he'd become the nominee of the Republican Party. But when they saw him as a nominee, then the chances of becoming president was 50-50 because you only have 2 office holders at this point. But they started out in the Republican Party with 17 persons running for the office. So therefore, that chance of him becoming the nominee, that they didn't think there was any chance of that happening. But when it came down to Hillary Clinton, who stole the election who stole the nomination in the Democratic Party, and then you got Donald Trump being the nominee in the Republican Party. Now there's a 50-50 chance of Donald Trump becoming president. Now they're really concerned about it. So they're talking behind the scenes, and we now know what those conversations were because some of those conversations have been reported out. Lisa Page and Peter Strzok, the lovers inside of the FBI, were talking about, he's not going to be president, is he? Lisa Page asking that question to Peter Strzok, and he says to her, no. But if he does become president, they're saying if he does, in fact, win the election, then we have a backup plan. And that backup plan can only be what we're seeing right now playing out. That is, say, if he's elected, the backup plan would be to remove him through the process through which all of them are the custodians of. And that's why we know that Rod Rosenstein is part of that apparatus. And I suspect, nobody's made this claim, but I suspect also Jeff Sessions was part of it. I don't want to go into that. That's kind of off of what I want to deal with today in this conversation. But Jeff Sessions is the one that opened up the floodgates. If he had been true to his mission as Donald Trump's Attorney General, this investigation would never have been started in the first place. But rather than him standing up and either approving it or not approving it, what he did was stand aside and open up for Rosenstein, who was not the appointee of the Attorney General by Donald Trump, stood aside and then allowed the process to go through Rosenstein, who he turned it over to. And that's very suspicious also. The deep state is not what you think it is. It is not the Illuminati, all you talking about, that is part of it. There's some government above our government. That's not true. The deep state is the Congress of the United States. It is the Supreme Court. You think those jokers, there's so much stuff here that needs to be talked about. You think these jokers on the Supreme Court are interpreting this Constitution? This court, the Supreme Court is part of the deep state, and that is because the Supreme Court became part of the problem under Andrew Jackson. Go read this book. I just finished reading it a second time. This is another classic book written by De Lorenzo called Hamilton's Curse. Go read that book. Go read about those arguments going on between Andrew Jackson, who is admired, by the way, by this present president. And I know why he's admired, because he's speaking in the same tone as Andrew Jackson, the seventh president of the United States, who they stole the election from him in 1824. Jackson was in fact usurped as president in 1824, and they put John Quincy Adams, the son of John Adams, in the presidency in 1824 and stole that election from Andrew Jackson. Well, go read about the conflict between Andrew Jackson and the Supreme Court, John Marshall, and see the conflicts that were going on when Marshall was trying to order Jackson to do things outside of the orbit of the Constitution, when Andrew Jackson took a firm stand against the BUS, the Bank of the United States, this central bank that was set into motion by Alexander Hamilton in 1791, the first of the central banks. And they put a 20-year, it was to be in motion for 20 years, which would have meant then that bank would have gone out of existence then in 1811. 1791 to 1801, that's one decade. Another decade would have been 1801 to 1811, and therefore the charter of that bank went out of existence. But in 1812, you have this the War of 1812. So they go back to the bank and reinstitute a central bank in 1817 to deal with the after effects of the War of 1812. Well, that's where the fight is going on. That when Jackson comes into office, Jackson now is in fact fighting against this intrusion into a mandate following the footsteps of Alexander Hamilton, but intruding into the space in which the Constitution did not allow for a central bank. And Jackson is fighting that battle. John Marshall gets involved in that fight. I'm just to give you some background on what's going on right now. John Marshall gets into that fight, and Jackson says to John Marshall, when he came into office, he went and defied John Marshall. Why? Because the idea of Marshall's view at that point is that the Supreme Court was not at that point deified back in that time period. That was just John Marshall's opinion. And who's to say that the Supreme Court opinion was any greater than the opinion of those in the House, those in the Senate, and those in the executive branch? In other words, we did not at that point deify the voice of the Supreme Court. The Men in Black, written about by Mark Levine, who said that John Roberts' voice, the tyranny of the Supreme Court, that their voice prevails. They can decide that what the Constitution means, and it's their interpretation of it that takes precedent over everyone else interpreting this document. Where did that come from? That's not in the Constitution. The Supreme Court renders an opinion. It does not mean their verdict is the only verdict out there. There's also an opinion of the other branches of government. It is a co-equal branch of government. And this idea the Supreme Court has a last word, where did that come from? It's not in the Constitution. And you can go read about the history of this country, where they have now made the tyranny not of the majority, and that's a tyranny there of the majority, because they were afraid of that. Now you have the tyranny of a five verdict court over the nine judges. 5 judges can assume the will of the American people and suspend that verdict by one. It really amounts to one judge of the Supreme Court. One judge of the Supreme Court can assume the verdict of the entire nation. And they're trying to act like the Constitution requires that and calls for that. You go read the early history of this country, where they've overthrown, that's what Napolitano was talking about, they've overthrown this Constitution in this country. These thugs. And they're talking about impeaching a president and removing him from office. You know why? Because they disagree with your verdict. And they have the nerve to call themselves Democrats and Republicans. Well, you're not there yet. And Mueller is postponing his delivery of that track because what happened in this last election was not what they thought was going to happen. They thought they were going to clean House and clean Senate. And they're going to have enough persons in the House, which they do have that, to impeach. They thought they were going to have enough persons in the Senate. And that's what they were crying about, by the way, the day after the election, because they realized that the president had gained in the body that can maintain his presidency. The president didn't lose members in the Senate. He gained members in the Senate. He's in a stronger position now than he was before the election. And that's why CNN, MSNBC, and all those other networks were crying about, in the aftermath of this election, about the president. They were very disgusted with this. They thought they had gotten this election down, and it didn't happen that way. And so now Mueller is postponing. They're saying they thought he was going to give the investigation and the report of the investigation. They're not there yet. So they got to do more work to create a climate through the American people buy into the impeachment of the president, and they're not done that yet. And so you're looking at the Congress, you're looking at the media, you're looking at the entertainment world, you're looking at the Academy, the three power centers, the Academy, the entertainment media, and the news media, as well as the Congress. That colluding that's going on, that's where the collusion is taking place, by the way. That collusion going on, they have not yet sufficiently damaged this president in the public eye. And the fact that the American people, his constituents, are standing behind him. Now, I want you to watch something that's going on here because it could change overnight. This wall situation, neither side is going to relent in terms of that wall. Donald Trump can't give in terms of holding him to that wall, and the Democrats are not going to give in. They're not going to give him that wall, and Donald Trump is not going to give in signing this budget into existence without that wall, because they're appealing to two different constituents. Donald Trump cannot afford to walk away without the $5.7 billion, and the Democrats cannot afford to give it to him. So we got an impasse here by these politicians in this political process. So the politicians would like to impeach Donald Trump politically, but to impeach him in the House and not be able to bring about conviction in the Senate is a lot of energy wasted, and it strengthens Donald Trump if they impeach and cannot convict him and remove him from office, and they don't have the votes to do that. So now we find Mueller postponing it. But the next part in this process is Donald Trump's response to the impasse. And what Donald Trump has said is that he will, in fact, declare an emergency. And in the emergency that he will declare, he will then go around the Congress and take funding that's already been allocated, for example, for defense of the country through the $720 billion that's been allotted to defense, and then have the military, since he's the commander-in-chief, to build the wall. And of course, if that happens, then the House then can act as if the president is an outlaw and see what that does with the members of the Senate. And if that case is made and his support falls away, then you might see them invoking the articles of impeachment and then bringing forth the charge because they think they have the numbers in the House. They will not back up the president because then they are going before the voters in 2020 to get elected, and that's a problem because 33 of them are up for election in the 2020 election. Don't mean that they're all Republicans, but 33 members of the Senate will be up for election. And can they stand the heat if the president is dirtied up and so on and so forth? That's their strategy, because they want this president out of there. And they want him out of here because, first of all, he wasn't supposed to be there in the first place. And number two, he's in the club behind the walls, and he's not there because he owes any of the club members anything for being there. He didn't get there because of the members of the Senate or the members of the House in either party, the Democratic Party nor the Republican Party. Neither party wants him in there. He's beholden to the American people that voted for him. And they are still standing behind this president. They want that wall. And they're standing behind Donald Trump. So they don't have the vote yet. And that's why Mueller is doing what Mueller is doing. Mueller's a criminal. And in fact, if Mueller does not, in fact, prevail, then Mueller's got a problem, because Mueller has violated a lot of the canons of law. And we're looking for, after this all of this is over, we're looking for the investigation, the real investigation to go on, which is to investigate the uranium one deal that was made. Comey was involved in that. Clinton was involved in it. The Clinton Foundation is involved in it, so Bill Clinton's involved. I mean, there's a whole lot of people we can bring before the collusion charge that doesn't involve any of the ones they're investigating right now. And it's very interesting to me that they are investigating the ones that for collusion, they were not involved in collusion, and the ones that were colluding, nobody's investigating it. How do you explain that? I'll tell you how I explain it. We have criminals running this government, calling themselves Democrats and Republicans. These are criminals. None of this was intended. The Constitution is in exile in this country. They're not following this document. This document does not allow what they're doing. They want to remove this president, seemingly beholden to the Constitution, but the Constitution requires them to bring specific charges against the president. Treason. Does anybody believe the president's guilty of treason? The president, the same one, is saying, make America great again. He wants to make America great again. Does that sound like someone that is creating treason, trying to make the country great, at the same time he's undermining the country? How would that be placed in the same sentence? To make America great again is treason against the United States of America. And then I hear this charge made to get the blacks to stay in the Democratic Party corral. The president is a racist. This accusation is made by a woman that doesn't know anything. The woman that was elected in New York, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She says the president is most definitely a racist. I noticed that none of the Democrats are racist. When Robert Byrd was the member of the Senate from West Virginia, no one ever raised a question about Robert Byrd being a racist. I know he had left the Klan by that time when he was 46 years old, at the mid part of his life. He left the Klan, but up until age 46, he was in the Klan and was a Kleagle in the Klan. The Democrats never raised a question about Byrd. And in fact, Byrd's affiliation with the Klan was described by Bill Clinton as a youthful indiscretion. Yeah, when he was 46 years old, when you're 46, that's like your mid-year at that point. Youthful is like your teenage years. You're in your 20s. But he wasn't ever accused of being a racist. But Donald Trump is a racist. All the Republicans, never a Democrat ever accused of being a racist. Because they're trying to get this president out of office because they do not accept the verdict of the American people. As you went to the polls in 2016 and you went against the grain of all the powers out there, the academic community, the entertainment community, the congressional members, all the ones were saying that Donald Trump had no shot. They didn't endorse him, didn't want him in there. But the American people had a different verdict about it. And they went in there and voted Donald Trump as president, and they have not accepted that yet. And they have been trying ever since to get him out of there, and it's not working. Let's see what happens now when Donald Trump builds that wall, because that wall is going to be built. And they're going to go around the Congress to get it done, because the impasse is not going to be broken by one of the two sides giving in. The Democrats not going to give in, and Donald Trump's not going to give in. That wall is going to be built. And let's see what happens in the aftermath of that. We're not out of the woods yet. Okay, we're out of here for the day. My rant is over. But keep watching what's going on here, because we need to take our government back, and we're not there yet. Okay, until next week, I want you to follow your dream, because if you don't follow your dream, you'll never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.